Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webcast, Inside Continuous Monitoring, Insider Threat and Beyond, Session 3, sponsored by DLT Solutions, ForeScout, and Symantec. I am Steve LeSueur, a contributing editor for Custom Media with the 1105 Public Sector Media Group, publisher of FCW, GCN, Washington Technology, and Defense Systems magazines, and I will be your moderator today. Now, today's webcast is the third and final session of our three-part series that's been put together by our sponsors, examining continuous monitoring and proactive cybersecurity. And our first two webcasts on real-time network visibility and automated remediation are available for viewing on our website. And if you look at the resource list on your screen, you can see the links to those presentations. And today's program will focus on proactive security through behavioral analysis and control, preventing unknown threats based on reputation and behavior. Before we get started, let's go over a few housekeeping items. First, today's webcast will be approximately an hour long, and near the end of the hour, our speakers will host a question and answer discussion. If at any time during the presentation you would like to submit a question, just look for the Q&A box, type in your question, and hit the submit button. And please ask as many questions as you like. Even if we don't have time to get to all of your questions during our program, we will respond via email to unanswered questions after our time expires. If you have any technical difficulties during the program, click on the question mark icon located below the slide window. And here I'll also add that you can often solve technical problems simply by hitting the F5 function to refresh your console. And in addition, you can enlarge the slides by clicking the green button in the slides window. And then finally, after this session is completed, we will be emailing you a link to the archived version of this webcast so you can view the presentation again if you like, or share it with an interested colleague. And that brings us to today's webcast on proactive security through behavioral analysis and control, preventing unknown threats based on reputation and behavior. Now, every day, federal networks and systems are attacked by malicious enemies who are growing increasingly sophisticated in their ability to evade detection and penetrate networks. And so today we're going to look at how agencies can apply intelligence-driven security to achieve a new level of defense against unknown and advanced persistent threats through an automated solution from Symantec and ForeScout. And speaking to us today are Tom Blauvelt, who is a technical architect with Symantec, where he provides technical leadership on security and particularly on the continuous monitoring strategic program. And then we will also hear from Sean Tellis, who is the ForeScout Federal Solutions Architect supporting federal partners, programs, and systems integrators. And so Tom and Sean, welcome back for our third and final presentation. We look forward to another interesting and informative program. And Sean, I believe you're going to get us started today. And so without further ado, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Steve. Hello, everyone. I want to first start off by thanking everyone for their time today. I know everyone's really busy, so we really appreciate everyone coming to take out and hearing Tom and I speak. My name is, Steve said, Sean Tellis. I'm a solutions architect with ForeScout. And today we'll be reviewing the third and final discussion today, which is really just centered around proactive prevention and how we can build upon the first two areas, which is asset discovery, situational awareness, policy maturation, and automation, and then moving into the final kind of fold, which would be proactive cybersecurity. So just some quick key topics to look at. We're going to, because it has been a couple months, we're going to review the three webinars just to kind of get context back in everyone's head, and then we'll tie them all together and kind of show kind of how the three fit a mold. Then we're going to take a step back and look at pattern recognition and how we develop our own situational awareness based on patterns, anomalies in patterns, symbols, and then how that is then transferred, based on our experiences and context, how we then transfer that into automation tools, and I'll speak to that a little bit. Then we'll talk briefly over the UCSS proactive prevention reference architecture, where just some of the service areas that we're hitting with it and the tools that would cover it. We'll then review both the ForeScout and Symantec solution summaries, and we'll just go through the technologies and how they're specifically being used for proactive defense. We will also go over then 2 use cases this time. Normally we did 4 or 5. However, this week we have a special use case which Tom will be presenting to us. And it's a rather large use case, but very compelling, very interesting. And so we just felt in a matter of time we would do 2 use cases. And then to Steve's point, we'll finish up with summaries and questions. So the first webinar was titled, "You Cannot Protect What You Cannot See." And what we mean by that is that undiscovered, unknown, unmanned system that's on your network, those systems provide essentially the beachhead for our adversaries to launch their attacks, to come into our environments undetected, and then to land and expand as they gain control over the larger environment. And so if you don't know what it is, if you don't know where it is, you can't manage it. You won't be able, it won't be patched properly. It's going to be, potentially behaving in an irregular way. You may not be collecting your asset data properly. There's a lot of issues, with that. And so we covered the threat landscape. We also went through a summary of recent federal breaches over the last 18 months that were very tied to situational awareness or basic cyber hygiene. Which was stated almost 85% of all incidents that could be prevented by just following basic cyber hygiene. We then went through 4 use cases, the discovery and integration with Symantec IT Management Suite, Control Compliance Suite, and Secure Endpoint Protection. We then described and illustrated a use case how UCSS can handle and deal with rogue assets. We went through a SEP augmentation where a SEP agent was disabled and ForeScout was able to identify that and re-enable it and then have it updated with a ticket created. And then finally promoted cyber hygiene through basic patch automation, which was really the intro into the second webinar. Tom, is there anything you wanted to add to webinar 1 that we reviewed that I may have missed, or any other salient points?
No, Sean, I think you've covered it pretty well.
Great. So for the second webinar, we're really automating security and compliance remediation processes. And so we now have, assuming hypothetically we've gone through and fixed our discovery and our situational awareness, and we're collecting attributes and configuration items on those attributes. We now want to begin to develop standard processes, the right way to do something. And that might be different from agency to agency. It's just the best for that organization at that time for how they patch a box, how they establish an IP address, how they run a security scan. As you start to standardize these processes, organizations begin to gain levels of efficiency because everyone's doing it the same way, and incrementally through programs like Kaizen or whatnot, you can introduce incremental improvements to efficiency. The big reason, though, at least for webinar 2, why process standardization is so important is because you really need to automate one process. You don't want to automate 10 ways of patching a system. That would just be a nightmare. And quite frankly, automation tools can fail. So if a tool does fail in the field, those engineers and admins and operators, the men and women in the field, need that standard process to fall back on. And that's really a lot of what this webinar went through. So we did summarize the growing threat most organizations face, which is labor is getting too expensive. Highly talented labor is becoming increasingly hard to find, even if you do have money for it. And the support problem is getting bigger and bigger. So we have a shrinking experienced labor market with a growing problem. And so really, that's really where automating cyber hygiene and compliance checks really makes sense. With the UCSS reference architecture, we basically walked through the various service areas that we were supporting with that and aligned our tools appropriately. We then went through the Symantec and ForeScout solution summaries and a value proposition summary. The 4 use cases, we automated hardening and remediation of a device. We also automated unknown vulnerability for zero-day scanning and protection. We provisioned the hardened system, so took special controls on it, and we'll be building on some of these use cases in the third webinar. And we also prohibited behavioral anomalies where we had a system behaving outside the norms. Another example would be a known system in our CMDB as an IP phone, or a ForeScout knows it as an IP phone, and it's trying to make botnet calls, or it's trying to open an FTP session. These would be non-standard or potentially illegal behaviors for these systems, and we illustrated how we would prevent that. Todd, did you have anything you wanted to add to the second webinar, sir?
Yeah, I think you did a pretty good job there, Sean. One thing I would say is that, as you're looking at implementing this type of technology for these types of use cases, interoperability with existing infrastructure and systems is very important. So the solutions that come in to basically tie this together have to be very flexible and account for a variety of controls and systems and environment. And I think we try to do that in our last webinars to show the flexibility of our enterprise solutions, Sean.
Yeah, thank you. Great. All right, so real quick, on the third webinar, we're not going to spend a lot of time here, but this is really about proactive security through behavioral analysis and control. And what we mean by behavior is a consistent platform behavior. So I come into work at 9 o'clock in the morning, I go home at 5, this is what I do 95% of the time, that's my normal behavior. If I were to come into work at 7 in the morning and stay till 7 at night, well, that would be an anomaly in my pattern, and there would be generally an underlying reason why I work a different shift. And so really what we're looking at is baselining patterns, understanding data, and then targeting our monitoring such that trigger events are created when a policy is breached. Much like when a system threshold on a CPU is breached, we're looking at actions on the network. So even though this administrator may have FTP, may have root access to a box, is he or she actually able to open, or should they open an FTP session to a customer's workstation? And so these are the types of things that we'll be talking about today. There's more of that proactive. Additionally, we'll be talking about policy-based like containers. That if you think about it, the idea would be to decompose organizational policy and compliance requirements into automation policy such that Symantec and ForeScout will be able to then interpret and enforce based on the bounds of the documented policy. And we'll actually show you 2 use cases on that today. The first one will be a crown jewel identification and protection. We'll have our DLP tool identify the crown jewels and then send special trigger events to data center security and ForeScout so that we can apply a different set of policies to it. And Tom, why don't you go ahead and walk us briefly through the second use case just so that everyone kind of gets a rough idea of what they're going to see through that, sir.
Yeah, exactly. So, as everyone is very aware, we have quite a few advanced threats that we have to deal with that are very, oftentimes very difficult to prevent and can be very difficult to detect. And as a result, we have to take a different approach in today's security control capability and analytics to provide better tools for those advanced threats. To your point earlier, Sean, where we've talked about things like behavior and patterns, we have to be able to consolidate feeds from a variety of sensors that may have a variety of different telemetry. Some might be user-related telemetry, some might be network-related telemetry, some might be file-related telemetry, and really leverage all of that information to help us detect, prevent, detect, and respond against these advanced threats.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah. All right, moving along. So tying it all together with UCSS. So again, the 3 webinars. The first webinar on the lower left in the green was our situational awareness, asset discovery, asset intelligence, know what's on the network before we can begin to defend it. once we have that situational awareness, that context of what do we have and what's going on, we then work toward process optimization and optimization and automation. And with that, again, standardizing process, working them into an automation workflow to further drive operational capacity. With the big takeaway there is, as Sean and Tom, generally Tier 3+ engineers, as we build a system or as we support a device or support something that's fairly regular, if we share that in an automation system or incorporate that into an automation system, we can then take that function and hand it down to a Tier 2 group. So they're performing the functions that we were at a much lower cost, and that frees Tom and I up to do other things. The third webinar, which we'll be discussing today, is proactive cyber defense. And in the center is organizational culture. That is absolutely the linchpin in all of this. As many of you on the phone know, a lot of projects live and die by organizational culture. It's one of the things that ForeScout and Symantec have really tried to do in these webinars is impress that upon the audience that culture is as important as budget, as strategy, as everything else for these projects to go along smoothly. Otherwise, everything else tends to slow down. Schedules tend to slip, budgets tend to go up, projects tend to, can be less effective. So that's definitely something that we've both seen, and wanted to stress upon that as you in the audience begin your journey down these types of similar paths. All right. So let's go ahead and start. So again, just take a step back for a moment and let's consider how we derive meaning or situational awareness through visuals, through our eyes, right? Either through patterns, anomaly patterns, symbols, what have you. And so on the right, you have a picture with 8 headless people, okay? And looking at the image, based on my experiences, I put down some bullets. What did I see? Well, first off, to me at least, this looks like a wedding party. The person in white would probably be the bride. By the count, unless one of them got cropped off, we have 7 bridesmaids. There are probably 8 men in the wedding party, including the groom. I've seen enough wedding photos and been to enough weddings where the flowers are supposed to be all up. So it would appear that the girl to our left or to the bride's right doesn't know how to hold flowers or wasn't paying attention when she was told to put her flowers up. It looks like a casual event. The ladies are all wearing sandals, and they're in shorter dresses, so it looks like it's warm outside. And it looks at least, unless anyone's cropped off or dressing differently, everyone's seen it. So that's how we're deriving context. So that's how I derive context, and very similar to how a lot of people derive context. And what did I look at? Well, I looked at the event stream. For me, the event stream was that photo, right? And the various data elements I was able to pull out of that photo to derive basically what was happening, where it was happening, who was involved, so on and so forth. Monitoring and integrating with automation works in much the same way. As monitoring tools look at the event stream and they take their picture of the data that's going along, they're able to identify anomalies and patterns such as flowers that are being hung upside down, or make identifications based on anomaly and patterns such as a bride because she's wearing white. These are exactly how our tools function, just with a completely different syntax and a lot more technical. But I just wanted to have that slide in there to provide context for everyone. Tom, is there anything you wanted to add to this?
No, I think it's pretty good representation. Okay. We've had a lot of conversations in recent years on behavior and how we need to move towards the ability to detect behaviors. And just due to the outdatedness of traditional signature-based, detection methods. And so we have done a lot of work with behaviors, and we're integrating those into a lot of our tools. And, different behaviors, different control points are required, or different analyses methods. And these behaviors oftentimes, need to be, or at least the detection mechanisms for the behaviors need to be automated through things like machine learning and things of that nature, because we have such an interesting and active threatscape. So behavior detection is where we're at today. It's no longer the future. It's here. And it's just a matter now of using big data analytic systems to help us with the challenge of looking through the massive amounts of behavioral type of information we can now gather to essentially find the threat in the haystack.
Yes, sir, exactly. Thank you very much. All right, moving along. So some common examples, I won't read all of these, but basically predictive analysis on possible attacks. So the big one there is if you have the ability to actually detect reconnaissance, which is fairly straightforward if you apply the right tools and technologies. I mean, there are ways to get around it, but that 80% of reconnaissance is fairly noisy. You're able to then take action against that, whether it's block that, block the segment it's scanning, block that host that's originating the scan, whatever. Proactive prevention also through no malicious entities that are protected by the UCSS solution. And then really, as we've been talking about, it's that proactive user and system anomaly risk monitoring. Again, my system is at this level, is operating at this level, is running along at this level. If there's an anomaly from a compliance standpoint, like a patch setting is lowered or the patch setting in the CMDB is higher than on the system, or an illegal action is taken on that server. So again, imagine a print server, and you had an admin walk in to the print server room, had to do a job across the data center. Rather than getting up to his workstation, he tried to do, or she tried to do, an administrative function from the print server, which may or may not be allowed. Those types of actions are what we're talking about, that proactive defense. And that's why, again, culture is so important. It's a great example of why culture is so important. There's a reason why we have people work from the workstation they're supposed to work from. We have a reason why we don't share passwords, and so on and so forth. And as we begin to put our defenses around this, we can be more proactive around that. From a technical and a policy and a cultural standpoint, we can go a long way in defending our systems. Real quick here, the reference architecture, we have the standards such as HIPAA, ISO 20K, NIST. We have the service area, the system control, application control, data control, and user control, which are supported by ForeScout on the bottom, and then Symantec Data Center Security for system and application, and data loss prevention, data insight for data control and user control. And then again, dashboard and reporting would be again ForeScout with Control Compliance Suite as our dashboard. So getting into ForeScout's value proposition, automating compliance and monitoring remediation. What we have here is a collection of systems. We have some printers, some servers, workstations, a mobile handheld, a USB device. And we had touched earlier on policy containers. And so what we're talking about is ForeScout monitoring and control. What we're able to do is apply policy wrappers or policy containers to ensure that network communications are in line, virus signature versions are up to date, and virus agents are running. System configurations are where they need to be, settings on a system, from a registry setting to a file permission, illegal software removal. So, someone's gone and installed, LimeWire or something on their workstation, so that'll have to be taken off, or integrated zero-day removal, as we saw in the last use case. And so what we're saying is we expect at a high level these devices to behave a certain way on the network, communicate on a certain port, have a user access a system from a particular location, patch level of the system, configuration level of the system. All of these then get put into like a container type environment, and then those systems then get put into containers and behave appropriately. As they move outside of those lines or blur into those lines, that's when trigger events are created, and we're able to alert and take action on those actions. And then this is how essentially we're preventing attacks from happening. We have a couple of use cases to explain that. So dovetailing a little further into what we mean by that. So if you think about your traditional network firewall, it's very good at protecting traffic that passes through its interface. It's not very good at protecting traffic that runs, quote unquote, underneath its interface. And so what we're doing is by mapping expected functions to policy control, we can augment that host firewall, or that network firewall. So hypothetically, without an agent and without a host-based firewall. So basically what we're saying is, imagine this is a server cluster, and there's a database server, a web server, maybe an application server, and they're expected to communicate across the network in a certain fashion. And much of that would go unnoticed by the firewall unless you're firewalling each application in that cluster, and generally, that's generally not done for performance and cost. So a lot of these things can be done without the firewall being known. So what we can do is apply the policies that from a corporation or from the application itself, like how it's supposed to communicate to the database server, how is the web server supposed to communicate out to the public, and how is it supposed to pull data off of the database server. And much like you map a firewall, we can map our virtual firewall as well and provide an extra layer of protection around that. And we do have a use case that we'll somewhat talk about. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Tom. Tom, there is one thing, though, before we hit on, if you could make sure that we talk about identifying the crown jewel with DLP, because it'll play into our use case, sir. That was just the one thing.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Sean, and thank you, everybody, for attending. I really appreciate you taking time out with us today. I want to talk a little bit about a few tools within the Symantec portfolio that can really lend to the greater picture of proactive security through behavioral and analysis and control. Symantec data loss prevention is one of those tools, and obviously we can just turn on the news almost every other week now and see an example of data that's being exfiltrated out of organizations and government agencies and the like, oftentimes by state actors, but not always. Maybe well-meaning insiders create a condition of exfiltration, or maybe malicious insiders. So there's a variety of threats that exist on our data. And it really makes sense, in order to get our hands around this problem, we have to understand where those crown jewels are. Data inventory is one of those absolute must-have capabilities within our InfoSec programs, so that we can put the appropriate attention around that data. You think about the crown jewels; they're in one location, or have guards and all kinds of different security controls around them to keep them safe. And we really need to start looking at our data and our networks the same way. A little more challenging because that data is distributed and it changes, and so therefore an inventory of that data is going to be outdated very quickly. So we have to be able to not only know where it's at, but how our environment's changing, where that data is going, and update that inventory regardless of where that data might be at. And of course, there's a variety of endpoints that we have to be considered about: storage, cloud environments, mobile, things of that nature that all come into play when we start thinking about where is the information that matters to us. We have a tremendous capability within the Symantec portfolio, our DLP solution, our data loss prevention solution is what it's called, and it is market leading, and it's by far the best tool in the marketplace from an enterprise deployment perspective. This slide describes a variety of different capabilities within the tool set. Essentially, we can find the data as it exists on your network, whether that be in storage, whether that be going through the network over a protocol such as HTTP or email or something along those lines, whether that data exists in unstructured and structured data sets. Databases need to be inventoried, as well as file servers and things of that nature. So we have to find it. And so Symantec has some of the best capabilities in the industry for identifying where that data exists within your organization. We also have the ability to add some machine learning to that capability as well, whereby you feed the system examples of what is important to your agency or organization. The system will learn that and then be able to keep its eyes open for similar instantiations of that data and inventory it. Again, having wide coverage on control points is very important. Data is going everywhere. We talk about this idea of the disappearing or the disappeared perimeter, and we still have perimeters in our networks, but what we're doing is we're extending outposts from our main castle. We still have this idea of a perimeter in our corporate data centers and things of that nature, but we're putting other outposts out there. A mobile device walks out into the wild, and it has to have a perimeter around it. A cloud solution, maybe a SaaS implementation, it's outside of your castle, but it needs to have a perimeter around it. So what we have to do is we have to allow these different control points to take their own perimeter with them, or put a perimeter around them in such a way that we can continue to project those controls away from the main data center or the main location. And DLP has a tremendous capability to reach into various different control points and mobile devices and all kinds of email and cloud capabilities there as well. A complementary product is called Data Insight. Where DLP kind of finds out where the sensitive data is, Data Insight audits access to it, builds essentially a baseline, and compares that baseline to identity information within a network to understand a variety of things about what's going on with that data. So, for example, not only where's the data, but who is using that data would be a very important question to ask. And out of the folks who are using that data, what are the what are the outliers? Where are the outliers? So perhaps if you have an HR share, and most of the folks who access that information on a daily basis are part of the HR group. However, maybe you have Joe user out here who is not part of any shared group among the other constituents of that data. Joe is now an outlier, and we need to be asking the question, is Joe authorized that access? And if so, should he not be in the HR group as part of our standard controls for access to that data? So Data Insight's a very important complementary piece here. We can also look at shoring up the access controls around that data when we identify folks who shouldn't be accessing it but have successful accesses. We can also look at unsuccessful accesses and track all that information. So Data Insight is a very important control around the sensitive data in terms of activity, because it gives us the telemetry or the signals out of that system that we can bring back to an analytics capability and use that information at a higher level than just as a silo. And I'll get into that a little bit more later to help clarify that for you. A couple top cases for DLP. Data that sits on your network that hasn't been used in a long time, that's stale data. And if it's also sensitive, the question that we need to ask is, should that data still be there? Or can we retire that data, archive that data, remove that data? Is it still necessary? Things like the growth of data. How is your unstructured data growing? Do you understand the growth rates? And do we understand how much of that unstructured data has continual viable use over time? Or are we simply putting up expensive disks to house unused information? This can allow us to build kind of a tiered model where we move maybe unused information, but still relevant, off to cheaper archive storage. We can automate that process with this tool. So there's a little bit more than just security. There's some information management in here, but strong information security will require strong information management. The two go hand in hand. The other thing that I'd like to talk about with Data Insight is identifying open shares. How many shares in your environment are open? In other words, allow access to all authenticated users or everyone type groups. And of those, where's sensitive data? Which of those are sensitive shares? We've had customers very surprised when we run this tool in their environment to say, hey, look, here's open shares, and of these 100 open shares, let's say, here's 5 of them that have sensitive, critical information in them, and it's open to everybody right now. This is the kind of tool that can help customers find and remediate those issues very, very quickly. This is a great slide because it shows how we're thinking the bigger picture. We talked about analytics just a moment ago. DLP brings the data classification, the sensitivity of data to bear. Data Insight brings the activity around that sensitive information. We can bring it to a single console like this and allow you, the customer and the user, to act on that information. So here you can see we can escalate or launch investigations, notify a manager who owns that data, or maybe the user who's violated a policy or is accessing sensitive data, to say, hey, did you know Joe user has access to your HR share? And we also present a portal, a self-remediation portal, to those managers so that they can actually remediate Joe user if they don't want him accessing that information. So we allow greater custodianship of data to the actual owners. Here we can see Data Insight integrated into the DLP console, and we see John Smith is the data owner, and we can infer that. A lot of times we don't know who the data owner is. John Smith may not be in the access control list around that data. The access control list might show administrator and information that is very difficult to identify. So now we know John Smith is the owner, and we can inform John of his obligations and rights as the custodian of that data. And I don't know what's going on with my slides here. I went haywire. Let me catch back up. And this is just simply showing the metadata that we collect that Data Insight can help us with. Now, as we talk about these different telemetry that we collect from a variety of tools, in previous webinars we've talked about some of the other controls that we can bring to bear. All of these siloed security controls and network-based controls can produce events and logs and things of that nature that by themselves might be helpful, but collected together and analyzed together can produce extremely helpful results. But in order to get there, we first have to have a level of intelligence to help us stay on top of current threats. Symantec has been collecting intelligence for a long time in something we call our Global Intelligence Network. All of the telemetry from 200+ million hosts around the world contribute to this database. So we've been practicing big data for a very long time. We have a variety of attack sensors in various countries that sit as honeypots, collect information, and we have 3.7 trillion rows of telemetry and growing at more than 100 billion rows per month. And we're just going to increase that even more because this is where our customers are asking Symantec to help them. They need help not only collecting intelligence in terms of what's going on in the threatscape, but to make sense of it. So we have tremendous capabilities here in terms of big data and producing these results. Now we have the ability to give a portal to our customers so they can access this data and draw from it. Here's your known botnets, and here's the malware trends in these various different countries, and et cetera, et cetera. But we also take this intelligence and we feed it back into our tools. And it helps our tools become stronger against the threats that are occurring. And we also have data feeds. In the bottom right here, you can see the data feeds. We can feed third-party tools or your own tools with data feeds to add additional levels of intelligence for your own use cases. So, for example, maybe you are collecting logs from your firewall, and you have successful outbound HTTP to certain IP addresses, and that's in your logs. Well, maybe some of those IPs are malicious. Maybe they're botnet controllers. And if you don't know they're botnet controllers, you're just passing that traffic as normal HTTP traffic. Well, let's give it a data feed and tell your system which of those IPs are known botnets on the network, on the internet. Now, all of a sudden, you have an incident because potentially you have data exfiltration going on and didn't even know it until you added this level of intelligence to your analysis capabilities. So that's where intelligence can really kind of help you out. And then lastly, at the host base, we have tremendous host base capabilities. And one of these capabilities is exploit prevention. And this is where we will essentially create a sandbox environment and watch the data going between the requester and the object being requested, apply that against known behavioral policies, and enforce prevention. So this is very helpful for killing zero-day threats and advanced malware and advanced threats. So for example, Internet Explorer should not be writing to the System32 directory under the Windows subdirectory. And in that particular case, that's probably malware. We'll block that, and you just averted a infection from an advanced persistent threat. And Sean, I'll let you take it from here.
Thanks, Tom. So as we discussed before, we're going to talk about two use cases today. The first one is crown jewel identification and protection, and we'll go over how DLP and Data Insight can feed trigger events to DCS and to ForeScout to apply special protection policies around that. And then, as Tom had alluded to previously in the deck, we'll be reviewing the advanced persistent threat use case. So in this first use case, we have at the top, we have ForeScout and Symantec data center security. And what we have here is two systems, a web server and a database server, that DLP has identified either through the value of the data or the sensitivity of the data that these are crown jewel systems, or these are highly important systems to the organization based on the data, the access to the data, who's accessing it, who's using it, so on and so forth. Once that trigger event is fed, or once DLP has made that assessment, it can feed a trigger event to data center security to apply an additional set of policies around that, much like what Tom was talking about earlier, to protect not just traditional things like ports or registry settings, but also actions. Are these applications allowed to make these calls? Is this user allowed to make this function? So on and so forth. Additionally, ForeScout provides a policy container around the network. So where DCS is protecting the system, the application, and to some degree the user actions, ForeScout is rounding it out and providing an extra layer of protection through a network-based policy container. So again, these are policy-based containers that say, based on the corporate policies, the value of these systems, and the sensitivity potentially of the data in these systems, we're going to put additional policy containers around these devices to apply further protection to them. So in this instance, if an illegal action does take place, DCS can stop it right up at the spot. If, however, it's an illegal action that gets past DCS on the rare occasion that it may, ForeScout will be the extra layer of protection. So imagine a FTP call from the web server to the database server. If DCS normally allows that web server to do FTP, we may then rely on ForeScout to say, yes, it can FTP, but only to these systems, and the database server is not one of those systems. So essentially what happens is, as that call happens, we block it at the switch level. So again, we're taking that, as we've said in previous webinars, we're taking that switch through our virtual firewall technology, and we're armoring it with the ability to block traffic based on policies held in the ForeScout client underneath the firewall. So kind of supercharging the security ability of the network underneath the firewall. Once it's blocked, however, we can do an intelligent block too. It doesn't necessarily need to be a hard block. With the virtual firewall, we can say, okay, at this point the web server is doing something illegal. Let's pull it off the network hypothetically so that it can't infect anyone or harm any of our users. But we do need some traffic to come in, for instance, for monitoring, for patching, for an administrator to come in, like the example here, and we can pass that through so that they can then remediate the action and be done with the situation. Tom, is there anything you wanted to add to this use case?
No, I think that's a well done job, Sean.
Thanks. All right, and then I will kick it over to you, Tom.
Thank you. So what I'm going to talk about is something Symantec's been working on for quite some time. This is my little disclaimer slide that says that we're not quite We haven't quite put this out for general availability yet, but it is coming. And as such, please don't make any purchases decisions based on these features because they are essentially subject to change. So when we talk about advanced threat protection, Symantec has quite a few tools that we have perfected in our labs over the years that we've used as we've gone through and analyzed malware and various advanced threats. And those technologies have largely been put into the tools that we sell, but the interfaces with those technologies largely exposed to our back-end resources. So what we decided was, as we took a step back and said, what's the real market need here, and we started looking at advanced threat as a big area of concern and where our customers have been asking for help. We decided that we needed to help our customers by exposing some of this technology to them directly, but also by leveraging this idea of big data and analytics that we've perfected through our global intelligence network for years. We have the largest civilian intelligence, cyber intelligence network in the world, and essentially allow solutions to be built on these platforms and these technologies and make them flexible so that our customers can leverage them and use them in their environments. So the trend today is, this idea of prevent, detect, and respond. Let's prevent what we can, and we're not going to be able to protect absolutely everything. Stuff's going to slip by. Hopefully, not a lot because we do a good job with our prevention controls, but some things will slip by. If they do, let's make sure we can detect them. Detection is paramount. If we don't detect it, we can allow an advanced threat to embed itself in our network, stay there for a long time, exfiltrate a ton of data, and take an embarrassing news article about how we didn't detect the exfiltration for a year. So detection is becoming very, very important. And then responding to a detection when we find it. How do we know what's priority, and how do we make sure we have the appropriate information to respond, the forensics data, the different telemetry that helps us to know what was affected. So enter in Symantec Advanced Threat Protection. We currently have a solution that is in a controlled availability. We're rolling it out with many kind of beta customers at this point, if you will. And we'll be releasing more components of this technology this summer and for general availability. So this is coming very soon. What we're finding initially is this advanced threat protection is really powerful stuff. The customers we've been dealing with, and these are the largest enterprise customers in the world, are absolutely loving this product. Testing is showing that we have a great fidelity rate for catching the malware that would slip by for typical prevention. We've caught malware existing in some of these environments and have been able to help them identify and remediate it very quickly. So this tool, this suite of tools, is essentially 3 modules that make up the suite. It's an endpoint module, a network module, and an email module. We'll be adding third-party capabilities to this as well. But essentially, these modules are sending telemetry information into a single point for analysis and things of that nature, and allow us to use some of this technology that I've talked about previously that Symantec has on tap for great levels of detection. Let me talk about some of that technology real quick. There's Symantec Cynic, and Symantec Cynic is basically a cloud-based file execution, analysis, and sandbox platform. So let's say that you have a file and you want to know if it's malicious, and you run it through your traditional controls, your antivirus and your heuristics and things of that nature. That catches a lot of it. Then it goes through reputational services. Symantec has a great reputational service called Insight, which catches a lot of that. What about that 0.00% or whatever that number is of things that slip by those controls? We have basically the capability of sending a file into this cloud and exploding or executing this in a variety of environments to detect the behaviors, and this is where we get kind of into that behavior heuristics, the behaviors of these executables, and determine whether or not they're potentially malicious, known malicious, or okay. So we're going to produce a verdict out of Cynic to help understand the threats. We also have this capability called Synapse. And this is a correlation engine that essentially takes the telemetry from the various modules, correlates them. And what it really does is it helps us to understand where the threats are. Maybe, if you had telemetry from a single control point, such as your firewall or your URL filter, you might see a known bad file come through the internet. If that file ended up at an endpoint, but the endpoint control quarantined the file and killed the file, then essentially it's not an incident. And before today, we haven't had the ability to really correlate those events in an automated way so that we can tell the incident response analyst, hey, ignore this, it's not a priority. We've already done the correlation for you. So that's essentially what Synapse does. It's going to correlate telemetry from different control points, help the incident response analyst worry about the file that didn't get caught as opposed to the one that did. I think we talked about these modules. The network module watches the protocols and the internet traffic coming in. It will use information from our global intelligence network to determine what files are good. If there's files that we don't know about, we'll send those up to Cynic, where they'll be exploded and essentially analyzed. And we have some tremendous market-leading capability that sets us apart from the rest of the marketplace. A lot of malware is detecting virtual space these days. So we'll explode it not only in a virtual environment, but we'll explode it in a physical environment as well. And so the power of the cloud gives us this humongous capability that most customers can't afford to put in themselves. Email will do the same thing. We're watching email for known threats, and files that are coming through there can be taken and analyzed as well. And then, of course, the endpoint. All this telemetry coming back in a single place. So now how does this look? First of all, we have in this particular example, this use case example, corporate user downloads a file. The advanced threat protection flags it as being suspicious and sends it to the Cynic capability, where Cynic then looks at the file, and in this particular case, it convicts the file. This file has some behavior that says it's a high priority event. An administrator received that high priority event and now has in a single console the ability to drill down to the conviction to look at the forensics behind it. Not only did it have a bad behavior, but what was the behavior? Oh, this was trying to hide itself from the antivirus, or this was attempting to write to a System 32 DLL or something like that. So we'll actually give you the behavior that caused the conviction. Now what we can do is say, hey, this file's not playing well. It's convicted. It's definitely not something we want on our network. From a single point, let's now perpetuate a signature for this file, now that we know about it, to all of our control points simultaneously. So if we see it again at the network, bam, it's stopped. If we see it at the email server, coming in over email, boom, it stopped. If we see it coming to the endpoint, boom, it stopped. All very, very quickly. And that's great, because if you have a targeted threat against you, you may start to see more of these particular events occur. And then lastly, you can submit it to the Power Eraser tool, where you can clean it off the network. Now, optionally, customers who have this, and let's say they convict a new file that has never been seen before, this information can be optionally loaded into our global intelligence network. So now you're helping your neighbors are helping you. So where company A convicts a file, company B now has the benefit of receiving the intelligence through the global intelligence network very quickly to essentially block any threats that are on the horizon. The same can be said from the email perspective. URL comes in. It's a suspicious file or URL. That's flagged and, again, sent to Cynic. Cynic convicts that file, and we have the same flow as we saw with the previous use case example. And then lastly, the endpoint. User now is at home, downloads a file at home. They have a laptop with them. They have an endpoint. SEP is running on that endpoint. SEP does not recognize that file, sends it to Cynic for a recommendation. Again, Cynic convicts it, and we go through the same workflow. So you have the same workflow, the same type of incident response capabilities, regardless of where we see that particular event occur in the network, and we can push the protections down to all those platforms, regardless of the entry point of that particular malicious code. And so that's essentially the advanced threat protection capability Symantec is bringing to bear very quickly, and we hope that you'll become very interested in it. I think it's going to change a lot of things for our customers in a very positive way. And so with that, Sean, I think I'll close it up here and let you wrap us up.
Thanks, Tom. So let's have a quick summary of what we just saw. So what we're saying is UCSS, and if you're following along with the 3 webinars, we're here to protect against known and unknown threats. We're looking to provide that proactive defense, that identifying anomalies in the event stream that make us think something is going on and stopping the attack before it happens. What this will do is this will reduce outages or interruptions due to risks surfacing into being exposed through preventative measures, and this will reduce problem and incident while improving the overall service function. As our CIOs and CTOs wrangle with their budgets and they have to decide what do I spend on service delivery versus service support. But through automation, through proactive intelligence, you can really reduce those service support costs while also improving the availability of the service itself and the delivery of the service. And then finally, improve IT service through consistent performance. Again, because we're putting policy-based containers in this instance, and we're putting an expected level of functional behavior for these systems at the application, network, data, user, and system levels, we're able to then better guarantee a more consistent, green level of performance for the services that, security services generally protect. And then finally, these are the contacts. I get in contact with the Symantec, the ForeScout, and the DLT team. And I will wrap it up with any questions and hand it back over to Steve.
All right. Thank you very much, Sean. And I'll just, again, remind our audience, if you have any questions, just type in the Q&A box and hit the submit button. And, Sean, we've already got several in here. A questioner asks, is some monitoring of emails part of this solution framework?
Yes, it is. I'll let Tom speak to that from a DLP perspective. Tom, do you want to grab that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the answer is yes. We have the ability to monitor email at a variety of control points. DLP has the ability to look into, exchange and notes and inventory sensitive data that may reside there. We also have security services for email for blocking malware, spam, and then eventually when we release the ATP, we'll interact with ATP to send files and things of that to Cynic for convictions. And that's we have a security email security.cloud offering where it's a complete SaaS offering for you. We also have an on-prem email security capability as well.
All right, terrific. Well, let's see. We just have a few more minutes, but let's keep going as long as we can here. Sean, a questioner asks, please detail the starting point to describe how proactive security can help my agency.
Well, the starting point is beginning with people, process, and technology, and in my opinion. And if you have great people following good process, you're now ready to overlay technology. What that technology will initially give you is that, as we said in the first webinar, that situational awareness. Then you can move to the next tier, which is as you finalize your process optimization, work that into an automation workflow, and then from proactive defense, begin to build intelligence into your system so that you can take reaction or at least send intelligent alerts based on behaviors or anomalies in your environment due to breaches in the policy containers. So really, I guess the best way to describe proactive security would be preventative measures taken to stop attacks before they happen. Tom, do you have anything you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, sure. Beyond prevention, there's also preparation, and that would be proactive. Preparation in terms of, hey, we're going to have malicious, activity, whether it's malware or people or insiders or whatever. So let's go ahead and be proactive about putting into the detection and response capabilities. Obviously response might just, start with an incident response plan and then find its way into certain technologies that you put in your environment to assist with that, such as forensics or things like advanced threat detection and what have you. So that it's very important. And, I just saw a statistic today, a CISO who presides over a major breach in an organization who does not have an incident response plan in place is far more likely to be released from his position. So it pays to be proactive.
All right, thanks. Let's see. Let's sneak another question in here. Sean, the questioner asks, as with other UCSS webinars, is this a modular solution as well?
Thank you, Steve. Yes, absolutely. Throughout the journey of the 3 webinars, each one of these, one of the main points beyond the technology and the culture is that this is modular. The UCSS solution is not rip and replace. It's here to come in and augment, and that's why we're a suite of technologies. We understand up front that that entire suite may be used to fill holes, so some components may not be necessary. And we would work with the customer to develop a comparable solution with their legacy investment. Tom, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just real briefly. I'll say that we build things with diverse environments in mind. With the advanced threat protection that's coming out, there are 3 modules of that. But we want to create so much value that you want all 3 of those modules, and we're doing that by taking a very thoughtful approach at how we build them. Much like Microsoft back in the day put together an operating system framework that integrated, copying and pasting between applications, and then built, the Office suite, and then integrated Internet Explorer. And so you essentially had a single platform because of its strong, interaction and interoperability. It just made sense to move that direction. Symantec wants to earn business by doing that in the security realm as well. So while we have modular, capabilities, we believe we're building something that is special in terms of the industry with the security advanced threat protection, and we'd like to explain the benefits of why it would be of value to our customers to move forward with Symantec and all those control points.
All right, thank you. And well, let's just do one last question here, if we can make it quick, because it looks like an important one. Sean, the questioner asks, what are the hardest challenges with implementing proactive security, if you've got any tips there?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, the hardest challenge is going to be culture and communicating a long-term objective that is, will have increments of value that you'll need to communicate as you go along. And that's kind of why we broke the webinars up the way we did. You wouldn't want to just walk into your CIO's office and say, look, we're going to do proactive security. You would want a plan that begins with assessing where you are, in the current maturity framework. Are you reactive? Are you proactive? Are you automated? Are you manual? Are you standardized process? Are you ad hoc? And then from there, develop that plan that takes you, with incremental value. And that was, for my challenges, that's what I had to, suffer through the most, is showing the gates of where either we're going to generate revenue because of this gate or we're going to save money. That would be the hardest challenge. And then I guess also culture, just right up there with budget and with schedules, culture, because culture really can throw the other 2 into disarray. Tom, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I'll say this. As we look to gain greater detection rates than we have in the past, we have always to deal with this idea of false positives and false negatives. If we tighten our controls too much, we start potentially blocking legitimate traffic. We loosen them up, we potentially miss important stuff. So the real challenge is analytics in such a way that can take the appropriate mix of telemetry from the different controls, whether it's preventative or detective control telemetry, and putting it in such a way to where we give you, the customer, and how you tune your systems as well has planned this, the necessary fidelity of information in terms of incidents and events, we call them campaigns, to actually put your high-priced security analysts who are, already fighting a lot of fires, to put them on the right track of what's most important in the environment. And then, that's probably one of the bigger challenges we as an industry have today.
All right, terrific. Thank you very much. And so I'm sorry, that's all the time we have today. So thank you, audience, for staying with us. And Tom and Sean, thank you for your very informative presentations and taking the time to answer questions. And before we go, I also want to give a special thanks to our sponsors, DLT, ForeScout, and Symantec, for bringing today's webcast to us. And as I mentioned earlier, if we didn't get to your question, don't worry. We will be emailing answers to all unanswered questions we received today. So finally, just 2 notes before I sign off. First, if you would like a PDF copy of the presentation slides, go to the resource list in the lower left-hand corner of the screen and click on download the presentation deck. And as you'll also see in our resource list, there are links to our previous 2 webcasts on this topic, as well as a threat report that you can download as well. And then finally, in the next day or 2, we will be emailing you a link to an archived version of the webcast, and so you can view the presentation again if you like, or as I mentioned earlier, share it with an interested colleague. Thank you very much for attending today's webcast. This concludes our presentation.